This call will be recorded and subject to monitoring at any time. To accept this call, press 5. To block this call, you may begin speaking now.
Yo.
What's going on, Chuck? We're recording.
Okay, but before we begin, I need to clarify. LFTG Radio meets the definition under Program Statement 1480.05 as news media press. And subsection 540.2 states representative of the news media means person whose principal employment is to gather or report news. Further, Program Statement 5264.08A3 states inmate may submit telephone numbers for any person they choose, including numbers for courts, elected officials, and members of the news media. Let's begin.
Talk to him. Tell the people what's going on with you.
Oh, first, I'd like to thank LFTG Radio for their ongoing efforts. I believe those efforts helped to bring about a resolution to my inability to have reached out to the news media. So that being clarified and said, again, I'm open to dialogue and making myself available to any questions that anybody may have in order to garner this very important support that I'm seeking from the public today and in the future. So the floor is yours. Talk to me. Any questions you have, I'm here to answer them, brother.
Well, we're gonna save the questions for the interview. You know, I just want I want the world to get a feel of, you know, who Chuck Taylor is and you know, your time in America and, you know, just how we ended up here today.
Okay, well, a lot of people don't know. I was originally born in Boston, Mass. Dorchester specifically, born in St. Margaret's Hospital. I come from I'm a first generation American, excuse me. My mom is from Trinidad and Tobago. Big up to all the Trinidadian massive.
Okay, I'm Trinidadian. Shout out.
Oh, yo, big ups, big ups.
Yeah, definitely.
Raised under the culture, played steel pan, raised listening to calypso and soca, Blue Boys, Super Blue. So my dad, he went to school in Boston, Bentley Business College. That's where the two of them met. After he got his degree in economics, my mom decided to stay in the States with me. And, you know, she got remarried, married my stepdad, my pops from Trini. And we moved into a couple of places. I lived in Mattapan for a while. I used to have family in Jamaica Plain and Hyde Park. And then we later moved down to Florida. But, you know, it's crazy because, you know, being Trinidadian, you got people from the West Indies that have moved all over the United States, especially the East Coast. And I grew up on hip-hop like everybody else. I remember those times moving, going to Brooklyn to go see my Aunt Hazel and them, glued to the radio, you know, recording the sounds of Roxanne Shante and the real Roxanne and all the rest, Biz Markie and Dougie Fresh and the rest. You know, so I'm a hip-hop baby. I grew up in that era, you know, alongside the reggae, calypso, and soca. So, you know, multiculturalism was always something that was big in my family. From there, we moved down to Florida. And, you know, my passion for hip-hop grew as well. My era is the Onyx, the Black Moon, Helter Skelter, Wu-Tang. Shout out, you know, to that era. That was a big time and moment for me in my life before I moved to Liberia. You know, my parents always made it their business to sort of get me in touch with my roots. My mother used to always make sure I made it down to Trinidad every now and then for the summer. And my first trip to Liberia was when I was about 7 or 8. My second trip was in 1992 when my father reconnected, you know, with us. And my mom deemed it necessary for me to get to know my father a little better. And at that time, the war had pretty much cooled down. And we left just before Octopus War. This was a major offensive that was launched by MPFL at that time. But I grew up like everybody else, you know, real passionate about hip-hop. Studied a little martial arts growing up. Just your typical...
This call is from a federal prison.
Just your typical American kid.
Yeah, okay. So, how old were you when you, made the transition to move to Liberia?
Well, that was around when I was about 16 or 17. A situation occurred, and out of loyalty for my friends, I got entangled in this situation. My mother deemed it important for me to not, face the same story that most young black males face by being incarcerated. And she decided that it was time for me to go live with my dad. And that's exactly what happened. That's how I made it down to Liberia. I made it there because of that particular situation. I was a juvenile at the time, and an unfortunate circumstance took place. And, we were raised not to betray friends.
So unfortunate circumstance that took place here in America?
Yeah, it took place in Orlando.
Okay.
I was arrested with groups of some of my friends, and unfortunately, a friend of mine, refused to step up and accept, the responsibility he should have. And as I said, we were raised not to betray friends. The only viable option at that time that we saw my mom saw was, to start anew back in Africa. So that's pretty much how I made my journey.
Okay, and that was when you made the permanent move to Liberia.
Absolutely. But
Was
I didn't
your
actually
father
move.
in office at that time?
No. The war was still ongoing. He still had rebel headquarters, MPFL, in a place called Bone County, Jibanga. And that's exactly where I went to go see him. I didn't live in Liberia. I actually had to go to school in Ghana for some time. And moved around a little bit in West Africa until the elections took place.
Okay, so how was your relationship with your father growing up while you were in America?
Well, again, my old man left to go back to pursue his dream. Interestingly enough, my mother always tells me this story, and it's a true one, because he confirmed this. One day he got up before I was born, and he says, "Listen, I'm going to be president of Liberia." My mom was like, "Listen, Charles, go back to sleep. You're dreaming. That's never going to happen." He says, "Listen, I am." And he had that vision in his head the entire time. So when he graduated, his sole goal was to return back to pursue that dream. So I grew up around an individual and groups of people that have pursued their passions aggressively, despite the odds. And if anybody knows Mr. Taylor's story, they'll know that he overcame great odds in order to accomplish his dream. But, his dream and his vision was his own. I never really connected with my dad outside of seeing him at 15. I remember him coming down twice for Christmas. So, for a moment in my life, I faced an absence like most young black males did of their parents. Except in this instance, my father wasn't incarcerated or on drugs, but he chose to pursue his dream and vision over raising his son.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah.
So when you got to Africa at 15, 16, how did your relationship begin to develop with your father?
It was a cultural shock. It's complex. And sometimes, brief interviews can't really cover it. A lot of people have encouraged me to sit down and write a book, to pursue a literary project that would be able to address all of these nuances and complexities. But I will say that, I had to deal with the cultural shock or moving into a different aspect of black culture, because there's diversity in our community that often isn't appreciated, So we have the black American experience, we have that Caribbean, and we have that African experience. And I can remember, going back and being faced with that. An acceptance, but in part resistance, So they used to call me the American chicken. So, dealing with trying to learn those cultural nuances and aspects of Liberian society under a war environment was difficult. And again, dealing with a self-determined individual whose focus and goal was to pursue a dream he had wanted his entire life, pretty much adult life, was complex within itself. Dealing with a person who embodied leadership and had to do so in order to survive and to meet the organization's objectives. So parenting wasn't the first thing on his list, let me just say that.
Understood.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds It sounds like it would be a lot, moving from Florida to Africa and, just experiencing the different cultures out there.
Oh yeah, and just imagine, they're just socially acceptable norms in various parts of the world. But just imagine, Liberia is different, Ghana is different, Nigeria. All of these social norms vary, and so oftentimes, dealing with elders, the African mentality is this: a child is born to serve their parents. And there's some cultures that aspects of tradition that need to be embraced, and others that need to be questioned or reformed. If you ask me, in my opinion, a parent is to serve his child and push forward a better generation. And so, just dealing with those cultural nuances, oftentimes when issues were to occur, you have to get an elder who can advocate on your behalf, who is that of that age group or peer group of your parent, to be able to actually have a breakthrough. This was some of the things that I faced, and I had to learn the hard way. So yeah, it was different, man. But like I said, a lot of these nuances really require, a literary work, a memoir or otherwise. And it's something that I've been seriously considering. It's just that, no decent offers have come.
This call is from a federal prison.
In order to really, take on a project of that magnitude, because I really want to create the world and draw the picture for the world on what I was facing. It's only after you are involved in a dangerous, complex situation that you really understand the dangers that you face. At that moment, you had to live and survive. Pulling back now, I understand the level of danger that I was surrounded by, and the mindset that I had to develop in order to deal with the stress and the anxiety and the goals, the successes and failures that came along with everything. It was intense. It was intense.
Yeah, going back to something you just said, about the cultural shocks. Do you think you could come up with what the biggest cultural shock was to you immediately moving from America to Africa?
It was learning how to communicate with the elders. It was learning how to communicate with the elders, what could be considered to be respect and disrespectful. That was pretty much it. Because when most of the decisions rest upon an elder's decision or a leader's decision, you have to figure out how to be able to get that message across. And there were so many layers to having access to my father, even being the child of a rebel leader or a president. That was the biggest shock. And it's crazy because after the war, I moved to Trinity. I moved to Trinidad, because I really wanted to experience Trinidadian culture, and I wasn't really interested in moving back to the States. So, I remember I got on the phone that day. I'm leaving Nigeria. I'm on my way back to Trinidad and Tobago, and I didn't even know where I was going to stay, but I knew that I wanted to be in that space.
Yeah.
And I had to connect with family, but the difference in that was the minute the phone call was received by my cousin Nats, she was like, "Listen, my home is open to you." I ended up staying in San Juan, in a place called San Juan behind the Kwesi there. Later on, I ended up moving to a place called Caranage. I got family in Beatum, Arima, all over Trinidad. So it was a great experience. I had the birth of my daughter, a young baby that changed my life. And when I came back to the States, I actually came to pursue music, a book and movie deal, and otherwise. I had ideas on fashion. I saw the waves that Game and Jay-Z and them were making, and I saw a blueprint, especially Diddy as well. I saw a blueprint as something that I could pursue. And, lo and behold, I get arrested by the feds, and my nightmare began.
Yeah.
My unwillingness to have become an informant, led to 3 indictments.
Yeah. I understand completely, but we'll circle back into that and we'll give the people more of who you are the next time you call. I appreciate your willingness to continue to participate and use LFTG as the platform to voice your opinion to the people.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. Listen, salute to the LFTG audience. Big up our respect. Same to you, Elliot, man. This means a lot, man. Men behind the wall respect you a great deal, brother.
Absolutely, you know, and let them know I'll continue to be the voice of the feds and contribute however I can.
That's a fact. Peace, King.
Peace.